Hello, welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be looking at several versions of pushing exercises and sort of giving my opinion or thoughts on what I would rate as the best exercises. Really trying to say that there's not really just one, because obviously I even have to bear in mind there's horizontal and vertical pushing, but really giving you a perspective on how I would rate the best exercises for most people. All right, so sometimes like rehabilitation and sports are almost the opposite ends of things, but in the end it all comes back to moving well, and the exercises that encourage movement, like total movement and efficiency, are the ones that I rate the highest. So the first one to start with is the most obvious one that most people regard as the best one, being the bench press, where I actually don't rate it very well at all. Actually, out of all the exercises I'm going to look at, this is probably the least favourite of all of them. So, you can obviously lift quite big loads. You can really do quite develop some strength through the chest and, shoulders, I suppose, to some degree, and even triceps. But, and here's me, I don't often do this. Actually, it's the first time I've done that in maybe, I don't know, 3 years. I very rarely use it, but obviously there has some advantages because there's the simplicity of it all, very little coordination. So that anything that doesn't require a lot of skill can always develop some the same with machine chest press and things like that. There's no skill or stability required. This does need some stability. The biggest problem I have with it is at the bottom here, and I'm probably going too low, maybe because I got it too light. But if I just go back, this point here is where I have some real problems, where it can really crush parts of the shoulder. The scapula being squashed on the bench here doesn't help either. So that's why I'll often use a foam roller or a Swiss ball to do things like that. Also, the arms being in that fixed position of the bar. So my left and right arm don't have any freedom to work independently. I may need to, for my left hand, it might just need to slightly move in a different position that I could do if it was a cable or a dumbbell, but I can't do with a fixed point of a barbell. And you'll see later on with the shoulder press how that same issue comes up again. So, so in summarising this, I would say, because it's simple, you can really develop quite a fair bit of strength, but the trade-off for problems of the shoulder, and especially through the scapula, in my opinion, not worth it. I can achieve the same outcome of everything that this can provide, but without all the risks, by using other exercises. Also working independently left and right, there's always one side that's a little bit stronger than the other. This one you can't tell what that is. So for all the, like I was saying, the trade-off of the benefits of this versus the risks, I can find, and you'll see nearly all the exercises in this video are way superior than this one. All right, so let's look at the next one. Okay, so the next exercise on the list, which is another pretty simple one really, and probably another one that most people would think of first, is the push-up. So far superior exercise to the bench press, especially if I'm working with rehabilitation, or I'm really trying to get that serratus anterior, which is quite often weak and inhibited. I'm going to get a lot more from that in the push-up than I ever will with the bench press. The main part is right there, that full protraction I can get on this, which is difficult to do through the bench press. Really getting that serratus anterior to really push out and get that full protraction. So where a lot of people with the bench press are actually teaching themselves to fully retract the scapula on this same action. Hence they end up with all types of problems through the shoulder. Might help them with the bench press, but really severely limits them on other things, and eventually leads to so many weaknesses and problems that can take a long time to recover from. So this one also is sort of where you start to see the whole body being used in the pushing movement, whereas the bench press, I really just cut myself off from the waist down. So my legs, even if I had no legs, I could still do a bench press. So you obviously can see Paralympics, they use that, but the Paralympics you wouldn't be able to do of a push-up because I need my legs, I need my core. So my core is working pretty hard here to maintain the structural alignment so I can continue to do the pushing action itself. So as much as the benefits of serratus anterior are there, I've got all the benefits of the core. So neither of those two things I see in the bench press. The disadvantage of this is it can be either too easy or too hard sometimes. So with weights machines like cable machines and dumbbells and stuff, even the barbell, I can go up in small increments to find the right weight, where this is quite big extreme. From kneeling can be too easy and toes can be too hard. So there are ways around, which I've spoken about before, but you know, in many ways it can be a big disadvantage. Now, one that follows on from this that I'll include with the push-up is the yoga push-up. So this will be specifically I'd be using for in rehabilitation, again, to try and encourage a lot more of that upward rotation of the scapula. So this motion, so I get it right there, just gives me that little bit of extra movement from the scapula, so I can get everything that is probably not working as well in the movement that's creating problems in the first place. It's also a stepping stone to getting to overhead movements, which most people with shoulder and neck pain find the hardest to do because it really beats up all the injured areas in the first place. So this is one way that I can use to overcome that. Now, the stability of all the push-ups here, because I'm in a closed chain, so my hands don't move, it means that I've got great stability through here, and I can get more movement from where is usually compromised, where with dumbbells and cables and barbells, they're open chain exercise, so they have to be controlled, they have to be stabilized. If you have trouble doing that, then there's no way you can correctly get the strength. So that's why most rehabilitation programs will begin with closed chain exercises, because it gives you more stability. So, you know, again, like, it depends on the person who I'm using it for. If with injury and that, this is great, but with someone who's not injured and I want to get strength, it's probably not enough. So that's maybe its disadvantage. Still a great thing to use all the time. Maybe I'll use it as a warm-up to maintain some integrity there before I do the hard things, but it just depends on the person. All right, so then the next one we'll look at is the cable push. All right, so this one is when I'm going to go with two arms in a cable push. So this sort of precedes the single arm things, because you'll see that they get a lot more difficult, even though I often would start with those. And I'll get to them in a minute and explain why. But this one kind of is really the same action as the bench press and the push-up, but now I've got this unstable nature of the cable press. Now again, this is superior to the bench press because I need a lot of core strength. I need actually some legs to actually provide the anchor point, as you can see here, the anchor point of my foot here, and my core having to stay really contracted so that I don't get pulled right back into the machine. So I have quite a fair bit going on, more so than just the pushing itself. Now I can actually make this more complicated and put it on the move, or actually have a forward step. So I'd be stepping back, having to control the action. You can see there, my core having to work really hard because I'm only on my tippy toes. So if I put my heels down, I'll get pulled into the machine. And it's almost an agility exercise combined with the strength version of the upper body. All right, so it's quite a clever way, a lot harder than it looks, that one, by the way. So quite a clever way to develop some really good strength in the forward, in the horizontal plane. So now the next one I'm going to look at is the first time we're looking at something overhead. Now this is where I'm going to use a kettlebell, and it's quite a light kettlebell because it needs to be. And basically I'm just going to be pushing this vertically up. Sorry, the video I sort of cut it off a bit, but you can see there with my hands, whoops, with the inverted kettlebell, it creates like big strength gains through the wrist and the elbow and the shoulder itself. So prior to me going crazy with a shoulder press, I can develop the strength with this much more unstable version of the kettlebell. So when it's inverted like so, you'll see here, sorry, I should have recorded this again, but that kettlebell can flip over. All right, so my wrist, elbow and shoulder have to maintain the integrity and the strength of that to be able to complete it. So it's a great exercise. Even though it's a strength one, I would argue it's probably more stability based. So it would lead into the more strength based ones to come, which I'll show you next. Okay, a quick word before we go on is doing a shoulder press with a barbell. So very similar to the bench press, in that I could do the overhead press like this, but same with the bench press. The problem that it has is that it really locks my shoulders, both my left and right arm, into the same thing. So the risk of blowing something out because it has no freedom is dramatically increased. And I'm giving you 3 different angles here. Maybe we might see something. My left shoulder is usually a bit tighter. But again, if I have a dumbbell, I have a lot more opportunities to work more freely. So like my left shoulder really doesn't like this that much, but with a dumbbell I can do heaps and have no problem at all. So, and it's mainly to do with the position that I'm sort of forced into, and I can just maneuver different positions, and you'll see shortly how I can manipulate those positions to get what I want out of them. All right, so that's a quick thing before I move on to some of the more difficult shoulder presses. Now, also, after I've completed a cable press and a push-up, that's when I'll usually move towards the dumbbell presses. Again, these are very similar to the bench press, but way more effective in that, like I've spoken about several times, I've got that more freedom to move. I can also use different variations of this where I can specifically manipulate things. So in this position, a bit like the push-up, I can really get my core working, and this time, for the first time, I'll actually get my glutes involved. All right, so my glutes and hamstrings are going to actually be the only thing holding me up. So this is superior to the bench, mainly for that reason, but secondly because the ball's round. Remember, the bench being flat would squash my scapula. With it being round, it actually gives my scapula freedom to move around it. So I can get a much better activation through all of those areas that doesn't compromise my shoulder. So I've got that lot more strength, and obviously with the left and right arm being working independently of them, all the problems that we've spoken about with the barbell type things are overcome with this. Now, one of the variations I might like to use is this single arm one. Now, this is where, even though it's the same exercise, being single arm based really brings in the core a lot more, and also to some extent the glutes. So the core and the glutes on this right hand side, basically the core's got to try and pull me back while my right glute's pushing me up, because I'm so unbalanced that it's going to throw me off the ball. So this is where I can use an exercise that's predominantly used as an arm exercise to now almost become a lower body and core exercise, with the arm upper body part being secondary, which is a great thing because it's teaching my body to get stable before it pushes heavy loads, as opposed to machines and bench presses which say just completely ignore the fact that you don't even need it. All right, so that's why I'll rate these exercises so much more, because I'm really teaching the whole body to work together to generate force to move heavy loads so that I'm not compromised, which is really how it should be done anyway. I would never really do anything heavy lying on my back on the floor, but I would most likely do it standing up. In this case, I'm not standing up, but I'm still using things that I would need standing up. That's the difference. All right, so it's not like bench presses are bad. It's just they're nowhere near as effective as other things. So why would I use it if I know there's a better exercise out there? It's just people stuck in their own old beliefs when there's maybe better ways to do things. All right, so now we've got some of all the heavy double arm bilateral things with horizontal. Let's look at some of the more trickier things with overhead and also the single arm cable versions. Okay, so this next one's called the Viking press. It's another bilateral movement actually, so it's one I probably forgot, but it leads into the ones that are single arm. Even though it's quite simple, it's quite exhausting as well, so a lot of people don't enjoy it because of that. But basically it's just using a squat action with a dual arm pushing action, which is Not exactly vertical, but it's pretty close too. And I've got like great leverage because I can use my legs. So again, it minimizes the risk into the overhead movement by using momentum and the strength of my legs and my core to help generate the force. So you can see there right at the bottom, I've got this squat action there where I'm really loading up the legs big time, and then I'm just pushing straight forward. And you can see the angle that I'm going on is that way as opposed to vertically up, as you would have seen with the military press before. All right, so I've still got a dual arm action here, but it's nowhere near as risky or destructive as the other ones. The legs makes the huge difference, and from a fitness perspective, it actually does a big thing because, like I said at the start, it's quite exhaustive. So in terms of getting a big metabolic burn, I'm getting a huge amount from this as opposed to all the strength gains in the shoulders and the legs. All right, so let's look at the other version. Okay, so here's another version of the squat press with a single arm, and this is where I'm actually going to be moving laterally as well. So it's a bit more of a sports-based movement, but again, it really teaches the pushing action while I'm having to control, like it was basically an agility type movement in a way. So, I'm really having to generate force out of my left and my, so I'm moving again left to right. So really coordinating everything on the body to work together as a team to decelerate the bar and then to push back and change direction. So that's why it's an excellent one for sports, highly coordination based as much as skill and strength. So, this is one of those things that you really, a really highly underrated exercise, and people with really poor leg strength don't enjoy it because it's so difficult. But it's definitely one of my favourite. I don't use it with everyone. Again, it's very much a person-specific thing. Again, if I want a big blast aerobically, like this one will do it. This one always wears you out really fast. Within 30 seconds, you'll be breathing heavy. All right, so and probably arguably more of a leg exercise, but the pushing component is definitely a big part of it. All right, so it's learning to push and create momentum into change of direction movement. So again, you don't see this used that often in the gym, but I've been using this for like 20 years now, and a great exercise if you can really master it. Okay, so looking at the a dumbbell press that's more vertical, because so far we've looked at everything that's like on a not on 100% vertical. This time we're actually using a dumbbell, and again I'm using leverage on my legs and my core to minimize the risk of blowing my shoulders out. Now also, if I'm not even worried about blowing my shoulders, I can put way more weight in doing it this way than I ever could if I was just standing still to do it on the shoulders. And very much like what we saw with the push-up earlier, I get really good scapular movement here. So it really encourages me to get that scapula moving all the way around so I can really position that arm in the best position to generate the strength. All right, so you can see here I'm using the legs, and I get this slight rotation and pushing it up into this neutral grip. All right, so like I said, I can easily, like myself, I might normally try to do this if I'm on a good day, maybe get this up with about a 20 kilo or 25 kilo dumbbell even at times. And very much like it's harder for my left hand because I'm very much right hand dominant. So again, it forces that left hand to match it so I don't have any asymmetries. All right, so I'm using the legs, and then I can really push it up here and get that feeling. It's almost like the weight is almost sitting on this part of your body. You can see how fully extended I am, and really like a ton of core work, but great scapular movement. And again, if I'm not even worried about any of that, I just want purely strength. Like I said, I'll be able to hold a way bigger dumbbell doing it this way than I ever could on anything else. So neuromuscular-wise, I'm lifting a bigger load than I ever could overhead any other way. This is by far the best way to really lift a heavy load. So I might specifically use this one for reps of 5 to 6, where some of the other ones I might say the kettlebell one 8 to 12, lighter loads and last longer. This one I'm not trying to last long. I'm trying to get as much as I can out of a short, like maximal sort of strength type feeling. All right, so it's another one of my go-to ones that I like to use with nearly anyone. If they can really master the positioning and the skill and the timing, you can do a hell of a lot with it with very little risk. All right, so let's look at the next one. Okay, so if I wanted to regress that last one and slow it down, this is how I would do it. So I would use kind of like a bicep curl where I'm transferring weight from, in this case, from my right leg to my left leg. See how my elbow is sort of pinned in? I'd push off my right leg and then do a bicep curl, move to my left and then push it up. So it's almost the same as the last one, but a much slower action. All right, so I can really get the control with it to learn the positions. All right, and see how my other hand working out to the side? That's very much like I would do in the suitcase carries. That's again where the core is working hard to try and stabilize the action to make you more efficient for strength. All right, so then the left arm, like a bicep curl, and then I'll push out to the side. All right, see how my legs are moving? So all my weight is on my left leg right now. All right, then I'm pushing up, rotating around. All my weight is now on my right leg. All right. Now the best part of doing it like this is I can actually put it into like a walking action. So I can kind of like use it to create like strength for moving with gait. So which is sort of like walking and running. All right. So this is where I can take a step forward. It's almost adding a lunge. So all my weight is on my right leg, and then I'm lifting it up and moving forward into a lunge onto my left. All right. So it's creating that feeling of having to like do things on the move. It's almost like running and then throwing straight away. See, I'm going to go straight up and that leg's in the air, bang, finish on the left leg. All right, so this is another great one, more controlled than some of the others. So you have to use a lighter load and maybe a little bit higher reps so you can control it. But yeah, awesome exercise for developing that strength in a moving action, and it really relates a lot to the gait and how the glutes and everything function in terms of the pushing action. Because most of the time we're looking at it with posterior slings, so pulling actions. This is with the first sort of some of the times where we're using it with a pushing action. All right, so some people, the coordination on this is a real issue, so it can be quite a tricky one to learn, but it really has some massive advantages if you spend the time to do it well. All right, so let's look at the next one. Okay, so now we're up to the cable press with the single arm. This is where these are probably these are my favourite ones, besides possibly the push-up, especially for the horizontal, just because I get so much stuff out of this. A lot of core strength as much as the upper body pushing. So this is where I've got like a weight shift, a bit like we saw that last shoulder press one. So I'm really generating all the power from my leg and then into the arm, and very much mimicking a throwing action. All right, so it's very, very powerful type of movement. This is one, and then I can move that into this one where I spin through and follow through. So it adds that extra bit of speed to it, almost an agility thing, but I'm getting a transfer of weight from left to right, and then I get that great scapular movement that we've spoken so many times in this video because it's so important with the pushing stuff and so many problems with it. So I'm getting that scapula really push out because it's unusual to be pushing in that direction. Normally I'd be pushing straight ahead, and I kind of was at the start, but then by the end of it I wasn't. All right, so I get like so many beautiful things. So glute strength, stepping through, speed, power, and then that beautiful scapular movement at the end. So all the strength that I'm wanting I get in that one movement. All right, so if I find it hard, I could just go back to the basic version where I'm just pushing forward and just getting that nice. So there's the simple version. All right, so I've got that nice transfer of weight from right to left. And you see that step through. So there's a huge core gain. So getting full protraction. All the chest, shoulder, tricep stuff that I get in the bench presses and chest presses I still get now. I just get a lot of other things along for the ride. All right, so it's great exercise to develop that strength. And like I said, mimicking a throwing action. So anyone in throwing sports, you'd really want to be good at this. And, you know, the hard part is just getting the technique and the timing of it, because it does take a bit of time to master. But once you get it, it's actually quite, I wouldn't say easy, but you do master the movement itself, and then the biggest problem is just getting puffed out with it. All right, so that's two of my favourite cable ones, and there's one other one. Okay, so here's the last exercise. Not necessarily the hardest one. Arguably some of the ones before it were harder than this, but this one has a lot of explosive timing. All right, so I've shown this one many times recently. So basically I'm just really trying to leverage the leg strength on the left leg to participate with the strength of the left arm. Fair bit of rotation happening in this, so there's a huge amount of power development. So at that point there, you can see how I really load up into quite a low position with my leg, and everything's sort of wound right up so it can explode forward. You know, this is such a great exercise that has a lot of coordination and strength in the legs that are a big factor. So you know, so if you can really combine it with a lot of the other ones that we've seen, so different type of rotation to this one. So instead of trying to actually rotate around, it's actually trying to rotate on the reverse part instead of the forward part so much. But yeah, really great exercise that's utilising so many things. A lot of the anterior sling stuff that we're speaking about and a lot of the other ones happen in this. You know, so if you sort of follow the process of the like slow controlled with the push-up to eventually, you know, a little bit more strength orientated with the dumbbell, and then eventually integrating it with the legs and power and speed and fast timings with all the cable ones that we've seen at the end. And obviously the overhead things, they're also a big part of it as well. But, you know, there's no real formula for everyone. It's just finding the best place to start and the gradual progression through. And then also when you know them all, not just get stuck on the one that you like, but try to still use all of them so you get the benefits that each one provides, because they're slightly different with each one, not necessarily better or worse, just slightly different. And it's using all these different angles and positions and equipment that guarantees you have to have the strength in it all the time instead of only for some things. Alright, so I hope you've enjoyed that video, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, so the last exercise that I've got to show you is this tricep extension. So this is the only isolated exercise for a pushing action, I suppose you could say. There's lots of them, like tricep push downs and skull crusher with barbells and kickbacks, all those various things. The one I prefer is this one with a rope extension, and I mainly use this like for elbow related problems, so where, you know, got epicondylitis with either medial or lateral elbow pain. And I like this one because of what it does with the wrist as much as with the triceps itself. So basically you can see here from this front on position how my hands can get this sort of pronated feeling. So like I started in a neutral, so if I just play it again, so you'll see I'm like in a neutral position here. So my arms there, so you can see the back of my hand, I suppose. And as I'm pushing forward, I rotate it out and get into this pronated thing. So this position of like going from neutral to then to pronation and then back to neutral, really effective for developing strength into the triceps. That takes a lot of pressure off of the forearms, especially with sort of more the medial epicondylitis, not so much the lateral one, but does sort of show that the problems originating through the pecs and the bicep tendon that are creating lots of shoulder and elbow, that forces a forearm compensation because of the shoulder dysfunctions going on. This sort of exercise I've found to be not the only thing I might use, but definitely one that assists me in the other stuff that I might use for in combination with, say, various forearm drills, wrist drills, to try and like get out of that overcompensation, which is a real problem with elbow problems. If you've ever worked with anyone, it can take a long time to really get on top of it, just because they continually use their arm all the time. That aggravates it. So having exercises like this in your toolkit can be really useful, and really exposes the weakness through the triceps at times. For everyday people who don't have those problems, I don't really see this as a necessary exercise, as sort of an overkill. So bodybuilders love doing all these extra things, but they're not really needed, or just would be better off working more of the other things that I've shown so far in this video, and developing strength in more integrated ways. It's more of an exercise specifically for a purpose of rehabilitation. All right, so if you don't need rehabilitation, it's not like it's going to hurt you to do it, but really wasting your time. Could have done something more effective. All right. So anyway.